Most people think laws are made by politicians. Elected officials debate proposals, votes are cast, policies are passed. From the outside, the process looks orderly and contained. A problem appears, a government responds, rules are written. This view feels intuitive because it places responsibility in visible places: parliaments, congresses, capitol buildings. But policy rarely begins where most people think it does. Long before a law reaches a legislative floor, a quieter process takes place, one that doesn't involve speeches or televised votes, one that doesn't feel political at all. Because in modern societies, policy is almost never designed by governments alone. It is co-designed. Corporations, industry groups, regulators, consultants, and technical experts interact long before the public ever sees a proposal, not through dramatic conspiracies or secret meetings, but through routine structures that have become normal: advisory committees, public consultations, industry roundtables, technical working groups. These interactions are framed as practical necessities, and often they are. Modern systems are complex. Energy markets span continents, financial systems move at digital speed, supply chains stretch across dozens of countries, digital platforms operate at global scale. Governments don't build or operate most of these systems directly. Instead, they regulate environments that already exist. That creates a structural dependency. To regulate a system effectively, governments need information. They need to understand how the system functions in practice, not just in theory. And the people who understand these systems best are the ones already inside them: corporations. They operate the infrastructure, they manage the logistics, they understand the bottlenecks, the incentives, and the margins. So when governments begin thinking about new regulations, corporate input arrives early, often before any public announcement is made. This input doesn't usually arrive as opposition, it arrives as expertise: white papers, impact assessments, technical briefings. The language is neutral, the tone is professional. The goal is not to block policy, but to shape it, to define what is feasible, what is realistic, what would cause disruption. This framing matters. Policies are rarely discussed in terms of moral preference. They're discussed in terms of risk. What could destabilize markets? What could reduce investment? What could produce unintended consequences? These concerns are treated as technical constraints, but constraints define outcomes. Once a policy is designed around avoiding disruption to existing systems, it inherits the priorities of those systems. Efficiency becomes a guiding principle. Continuity becomes a goal. Stability becomes a requirement. None of these are inherently wrong, but they are not neutral. They privilege certain outcomes over others. When growth is prioritized, restraint becomes harder to argue for. When efficiency is emphasized, equity becomes secondary. When stability is prized, experimentation becomes risky. Over time, these priorities become embedded in policy frameworks, and once embedded, they are difficult to challenge, because challenging them doesn't look like disagreement, it looks like irresponsibility. Opposing efficiency sounds like opposing progress. Questioning growth sounds like opposing prosperity. Disrupting stability sounds like courting chaos. So debate narrows, not because dissent is silenced, but because the boundaries of what feels reasonable are quietly defined in advance. This is how co-design works in practice. Governments don't surrender authority. Corporations don't write laws directly. Instead, both sides operate within a shared system of incentives. Governments want predictable outcomes. Corporations want predictable environments. Regulation becomes a tool for managing risk, not redefining systems. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. Governments write policies that assume corporate participation and compliance. Corporations adapt their behavior in ways that justify those assumptions. The system stabilizes around mutual dependence. This doesn't require bad intentions. It emerges naturally from how modern governance is structured. Complex systems reward coordination. Conflict introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is expensive. So policy tends to evolve incrementally. Small adjustments, gradual reforms, careful language. Big questions are postponed. Should this system exist at all? Should it operate at this scale? Should certain activities be limited outright? Those questions are harder to integrate into a process built around optimization. Optimization assumes the system is worth preserving. This is why many policies feel technical rather than democratic. They appear as frameworks, standards, or compliance rules. They regulate how things are done, not whether they should be done. And by the time the public becomes aware of a policy, its fundamental structure is already set. Public debate happens downstream, after assumptions are locked, after trade-offs are embedded, after alternatives are excluded. At that stage, choices are limited. The debate becomes about details, timelines, thresholds, exemptions, not direction. This creates a sense of inevitability. Policies feel like the only possible outcome, as if no other path ever existed. But that inevitability is constructed. It emerges from a process that prioritizes continuity over disruption. This is especially visible in areas like finance, technology, energy, and healthcare, sectors where complexity is high and stakes are large. In these systems, regulation often follows innovation. Governments respond to changes after they are already widespread, and when they do, they rely on the same actors who introduced the change to help manage it. This reinforces existing power structures, not through coercion, but through participation. Corporations become stakeholders in regulation. Governments become partners in system maintenance. Neither side controls the system entirely, but together they shape its evolution. Over time, this shapes how power is exercised, not through direct commands, but through alignment. Rules don't dictate behavior, they guide it. They create incentives, they define acceptable risk, they signal what is encouraged and what is discouraged. Once these signals are in place, behavior adjusts naturally, no enforcement drama required. The system governs itself. This is why many policies feel disconnected from public sentiment. People may disagree with outcomes, but the structure that produced them feels immovable, because it isn't held in one place. It exists across institutions, industries, and norms. Changing it requires more than new laws. It requires rethinking how policy itself is designed. And that is the hardest change of all, because co-design isn't visible. There's no single decision point to challenge, no obvious villain, just a system that has learned to reproduce itself quietly.